Before we dive into this wild ride, drop a quick hi in the comment section. It might feel like a tiny thing, but trust me, it makes a huge difference. That simple hi tells YouTube to share this story with even more sci-fi fans, more dreamers, more explorers just like us. I'd honestly love to see where you're tuning in from. Are you watching late at night with headphones on, or blasting this on a speaker while imagining the galaxy burning? Either way, say hi. I'll be checking.
In the cold void between stars, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists a truth that the galaxy's elder races refuse to speak aloud. Mercy is a weakness, and compassion is a luxury reserved only for the strong. The archivists of Velcora had recorded it all. Every species that had encountered the Sirith, every delegation that had arrived on their dying world with promises of aid, only to turn their ships around when they saw the cost. The records were clinical, precise, and utterly damning. 47 advanced civilizations had visited the Sirith homeworld in the past decade. 47 had left them to die. But on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, a species that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel was about to receive the same distress call. And the galaxy was about to learn that humanity had never been very good at following the rules. The bridge of the UNS Endeavour hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-trained crew. Captain Sarah Chen stood before the viewport, watching the stars streak past as they traveled through slipspace, when the communications array lit up with an emergency frequency that hadn't been used in their sector for years. Captain, Lieutenant Marcus Webb's voice cut through the bridge's ambient noise, his hands flying across his console. "We're receiving a distress signal. It's in multiple languages, ma'am. They're broadcasting in every known dialect of Galactic Standard." Sarah turned from the viewport, her dark eyes sharp with concern. "Put through." The voice that filled the bridge was weak, broken by static, and what could only be described as exhausted desperation. It spoke in halting Galactic Standard, the universal language of the civilized galaxy, a tongue humanity had only recently learned. "This is Sirith Homeworld, Corona Prime. We are dying. Our sun collapsing into red giant phase, centuries ahead of prediction. Atmospheric degradation 90%. Population of 8 billion, no means of evacuation. We have 6 standard months. Please, if anyone can hear this, we have children. We have." The message cut to static, then looped back to the beginning. The bridge fell silent. Sarah could feel every eye on her, waiting for the decision that she knew would define her career, possibly her life. "How far?" she asked quietly. Webb checked his instruments. 3 weeks at maximum slip-space velocity, ma'am. "But Captain, the database shows that this signal has been broadcasting for 4 months. There are 47 logged responses from other species. 47 declined assistance." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Why?" Pulling up the analysis now. Webb's face grew pale as he read. "The Sirith are bipedal, similar to humans in size and structure. Their world is rich in heavy metals and rare isotopes, valuable. But ma'am, they're dying from a combination of radiation poisoning and atmospheric collapse. The initial estimates suggest that to evacuate even a fraction of their population, a responding species would need to commit virtually their entire civilian fleet for months. The radiation exposure alone would contaminate ships, requiring complete refits. The economic cost is astronomical. So they were abandoned because saving them is expensive." Sarah's voice could have cut diamond. Commander James Rodriguez, her second in command, stepped forward. His weathered face was grave. "Captain, I need to point out the obvious. We're a single exploration vessel with a crew of 300. We can't evacuate 8 billion people. The math is, it's impossible." "The math is always impossible," Sarah said softly, her mind already racing through scenarios, until someone does it anyway. "Helm, set course for Corona Prime. Maximum slip-space velocity." "Captain," Rodriguez began. "I said set the course, Commander." Sarah's voice hardened. "And get me a line to Earth Command. If we're going to pull off the impossible, we're going to need help." What would you do if you received that distress call? Would you calculate the odds and turn away, or would you push forward into the impossible? Remember that answer, because it's the difference between humans and almost every other species in the galaxy. 10,000 light-years away, in the crystalline towers of the Velcora Conclave, Ambassador Thelvas reviewed the latest reports with growing dread. The Syrith's signal had been received by a human vessel. The Endeavor was now in slip space, heading directly toward Corona Prime. "They don't understand," Thelvas whispered, his 4 eyes blinking in distress. "They're too young, too naive. They'll bankrupt themselves trying to save a species that's already lost." His aide, a younger Velcora named Shelmiz, tilted her head in the gesture their species used for confusion. "Perhaps they see something we don't, Ambassador. The humans are peculiar." Peculiar is a generous term. Thelvas brought up a holographic display showing humanity's brief history in galactic affairs. They've been spacefaring for less than a century. They've fought wars amongst themselves that nearly destroyed their own planet. They're impulsive, emotional, and they lack the evolutionary wisdom of the elder races. They also, Shelmiz noted quietly, ended those wars. Their planet is now unified, and their technology, while crude, advances at a rate we've never seen in any species. Thelvas dismissed the hologram with a gesture. "Send a message to the Endeavor. Strongly worded. Explain to them what the 47 civilizations before them already understand. The Syrith cannot be saved without destroying the economy and resources of whoever tries. There's a reason the galaxy has a protocol for terminal species events." "We let them die," Shelmiz said flatly. "We recognize reality," Thelvas corrected. "It's the kindest thing we can do." The message from the Velcora Conclave reached the Endeavor while they were still 3 days from Corona Prime. Captain Chun read it twice, then called her senior staff to the briefing room. "They're telling us to turn back," she announced, projecting the message on the wall display. "The Conclave says the Syrith situation is classified as a terminal species event. That's apparently galactic code for too expensive to bother saving." Dr. Emily Foster, the ship's chief science officer, leaned forward. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes blazed with barely controlled fury. "They've given up on 8 billion people because of economics?" The Conclave estimates it would take a fleet of several thousand ships, working continuously for 6 months, to evacuate the Syrith population, Rodriguez read from a separate datapad. The radiation exposure would contaminate every vessel. The cost to decontaminate and refit would exceed the GDP of most galactic economies. "So we're just supposed to let them die?" Lieutenant Webb's voice cracked slightly. He was young, barely 30, and this was his first deep space assignment. Sarah stood at the head of the table, her hands pressed flat against its surface. The Conclave also included something else in their message. A warning. They say that every species that's tried to help the Syrith has pulled back after seeing the actual conditions on Corona Prime. The radiation levels are worse than any initial scan show. The atmospheric collapse is accelerating, and the Syrith themselves. She paused, her expression troubled. They're apparently not reacting well to their situation. "What does that mean?" Dr. Foster asked. "Social collapse, riots, violence." The Conclave's last observation team reported that Corona Prime is descending into chaos. They suggest that even if we could evacuate people, we'd be risking our crew trying to extract refugees from an active disaster zone. The room fell silent. Finally, Rodriguez spoke. "Captain, I know what you want to do, but we need to be realistic. We're one ship. What can we possibly accomplish?" Sarah Chun smiled, but it was a hard smile, the kind that had gotten her through the Titan Colony Rebellion and the Solar Blockade. "Commander, do you know what humanity's specialty is?" "Ma'am, we don't know when to quit." She tapped her communicator. "Communications. Get me a priority channel to Earth Command, the Mars shipyards, and every human colony with available vessels. And patch me through to something called the Civilian Emergency Response Collective. I've been reading about them. Apparently, they're the private sector equivalent of our rapid response teams." "What are you planning, Captain?" Dr. Foster asked, though her smile suggested she already knew. I'm planning to show the galaxy that just because something is impossible doesn't mean humans won't try it anyway. We're going to evacuate Corona Prime. When the Endeavour finally emerged from slipspace at the edge of the Corona system, the sight that greeted them was even worse than the reports had suggested. The system's star burned an angry red, swollen and violent. Corona Prime orbited within what should have been the habitable zone, but was now barely clinging to survival. The planet's atmosphere was visible from space, a roiling mass of brown and yellow clouds, churning with storms that never ended. Radiation levels R. Lieutenant Webb's voice trailed off. Captain, we can't go into orbit without significant shielding enhancement. The ambient radiation would cook us in hours. What about the Cyrith? Sarah demanded. How are they surviving? Dr. Foster was already running the analysis. Underground. According to these readings, the entire surface is uninhabitable. They must have retreated to underground cities and facilities. But Captain, she looked up, her face pale. The radiation is penetrating even underground. At current rates, they have maybe 4 months before even the deepest shelters fail. Less time than we thought, Rodriguez muttered. Sarah was about to respond when the communications array lit up. Not with a transmission, but with visual contact. A ship was approaching from the dark side of the planet. Large, angular, built with a kind of practical brutality that suggested a civilization focused on survival rather than aesthetics. We're being hailed, Webb announced. Audio only. It's in galactic standard. Put it through. The voice that came through was raspy, tired, but carried an undertone of desperate hope. Human vessel. This is Matriarch Kethal of the Cyrith Emergency Council. We received your message that you were coming. We didn't believe it. We thought it was another false hope, another species coming to observe our death. Sarah stepped forward, as if proximity to the speaker could convey her sincerity. Matriarch Kethal, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the UNS Endeavour. We're here to help. A long pause. Then barely a whisper. Why? And isn't that the question, really? Why would one species, barely mature in the cosmic sense, commit to helping another when the entire galaxy had already written them off? The answer would reshape galactic civilization, but first, humanity had to survive what came next. Because, Sarah said simply, it's the right thing to do. And because we refuse to let 8 billion people die when we have the capacity to try saving them. Another pause. Then, Captain Chen, we are grateful. But you need to understand what you're committing to. Come to the surface. See what we've become. See what you're promising to save. Then, if you still want to help, we'll discuss how. The shuttle descended through Corona Prime's poisoned atmosphere, shuddering with every layer of toxic clouds they passed through. Captain Chun, Commander Rodriguez, and Dr. Foster wore full environmental suits. But even through the advanced filtration systems, the radiation alarms chirped constant warnings. We're losing 2% hull integrity every minute we're in the soup, the shuttle pilot reported nervously. I can give you 6 hours on the surface before we risk permanent contamination. The underground city of Kethmora had once housed 2 million Cyrith. Now, as Sarah and her team were escorted through its corridors by Matriarch Kethal's guards, it was clear that the population had swelled to crushing density. The Cyrith were humanoid, as the reports had indicated, bipedal, with 2 arms and a head, though their skin was a pale blue and their eyes were larger, adapted for lower light conditions. But it was their expressions that struck Sarah the hardest. Every face they passed showed the same hollow-eyed exhaustion, the same quiet desperation of people who had already begun to mourn themselves. We were a proud civilization, Matriarch Kethal explained as she led them through the cramped corridors. She was tall for her species, perhaps 6.5 feet, with age markings that suggested she was well into her elder years. Artists, philosophers, scientists. We reached the stars 3,000 years ago. We had colonies, trade agreements, cultural exchanges with a dozen species. What happened to them? Dr. Foster asked. Your colonies? Kethal's expression hardened. When our sun began its premature collapse, we called for help. We asked our colonies to prepare for evacuations. Do you know what they said? Sarah remained silent, letting the matriarch speak. They said they'd become independent, that they couldn't afford to harbor refugees on the scale we needed. Some were honest about it. They simply didn't have the resources. Others. Her voice cracked slightly. Others said we were already dead, and they needed to look to their own futures. They entered a massive chamber that might have once been a gathering hall or cultural center. Now it was packed with families, children, elderly, all living in tight clusters with makeshift barriers separating one group from another. This is level 7, Kethal continued. We have 63 levels below the surface. All of them look like this, or worse. 8 billion people, Captain Chun, crammed into spaces designed for perhaps 2 billion. We have food shortages, water rationing, and the radiation is slowly seeping into even our deepest shelters. We're not just dying, we're dying slowly, watching it happen, unable to stop it. Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of Cyrith, who looked back with a mixture of hope and suspicion. A child, no more than 3 or 4 in human terms, clung to her mother's leg, staring at the strange creatures in environmental suits. How long? Sarah asked quietly. The optimistic estimate is 4 months before level 1 starts experiencing lethal radiation exposure. Every level below that adds maybe a week. We'll try to consolidate to move everyone deeper, but Kethal gestured helplessly. You see our situation. Commander Rodriguez had been quietly running calculations on his datapad. Matriarch, with all respect, the math is impossible. Even if Earth Command authorizes a full evacuation fleet, even if every human colony commits every available vessel, we couldn't evacuate 8 billion people in 4 months. The logistics alone. Then what do you propose, Commander? Kethal's voice wasn't angry, just tired. Because I've had this conversation 47 times with 47 different species. They all come, they all see, they all calculate, and they all leave. At least you humans have the decency to look guilty about it. Sarah had been quiet, staring at the crowded chamber, at the faces of people who had already accepted their death. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried absolute conviction. We evacuate who we can, and then we save the planet. Every head turned to look at her. Dr. Foster's jaw dropped. Rodriguez looked like he wanted to check her for a concussion. But it was Matriarch Kethal who spoke first. Save the planet? Captain Chun, with respect, our star is collapsing. You can't stop stellar evolution. Sarah turned to face her. No, but you can buy time. Dr. Foster, is it theoretically possible to stabilize a star's collapse? Even temporarily. The science officer blinked several times, her mind clearly racing. Theoretically, yes. If you could inject sufficient mass and energy into the star's core, you might be able to delay the expansion phase. But the scale of power required would be, Captain, you'd need to convert an entire planet's worth of mass directly into energy and channel it into the sun. No species has technology on that scale. Actually, Sarah said with a slight smile, I read a paper about 6 months ago. It was considered theoretical science fiction by most of the galactic community, but it was written by a joint human-Velcora research team about using coordinated slip-space ruptures to create artificial gravity wells. The idea was to use them for deep space mining, but the underlying principle could be scaled up, Dr. Foster breathed. Oh my God! You want to create a gravity well that will pull mass from the outer system directly into the star's core. You want to force-feed Corona Prime Sun until it stabilizes. That's insane, Rodriguez stated flatly. That's humanity, Sarah countered. Matriarch Kethal, here's my proposal. We evacuate as many people as we can, prioritize children, pregnant mothers, the elderly, and specialists we'll need for the reconstruction. We get them off-world and to safe harbors in human space. While we're doing that, we gather every slip-space-capable vessel we can find and attempt to stabilize your sun. If it works, Corona Prime becomes habitable again and your people can come home. If it doesn't, at least we saved as many as we could. The chamber had gone completely silent. Every Cyrith who could hear the conversation was staring at the human captain with expressions ranging from disbelief to desperate hope. You would do this? Kethal whispered. You would risk your ships, your resources, your people's economic future for a species you've never met. Sarah looked around the chamber one more time, at the faces of people who had been abandoned by the galaxy. Then she met Kethal's eyes directly. Matriarch, I'm going to tell you something about humanity. We're a young species. We've made terrible mistakes. We've fought wars that nearly destroyed us. But we learned something from all that pain and violence, that the measure of a civilization isn't how strong it is or how wealthy. It's how it treats those who can't defend themselves. You asked me why we're helping. That's why. Because when we look at Corona Prime, we don't see the math of economics. We see 8 billion people who deserve to live. Would the galaxy call it naive? Probably. Foolish? Certainly. But here's what makes humans different. We've stared into our own darkness and chosen to be better. And when we make that choice, we don't do it halfway. Matriarch Kethal was silent for a long moment. Then, with a gesture that was clearly ceremonial among her people, she placed her hand over her chest and bowed deeply. When she straightened, there were tears in her large eyes. Then we accept your help, Captain Chun. And we will remember what humanity did here for the rest of our existence. The next 3 months became a testament to what humanity could accomplish when it chose to ignore the word impossible. Earth Command's initial response to Captain Chen's plan was exactly what she expected. A politely worded version of absolutely not. The cost estimates alone would set human expansion back by decades. The risk to their fleet was enormous. And the plan to stabilize Corona Prime Sun was so far beyond proven technology that the Scientific Advisory Board labeled it suicidal fantasy. But then something unexpected happened. The message from Corona Prime, the images from Keth Mora's underground cities, the recordings of Captain Chen's promise, all of it was leaked to the public. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered it was deliberate, that someone in Earth Command wanted the decision taken out of their hands. Either way, within 48 hours, humanity had its answer. The response wasn't from governments or military commands. It came from private citizens, from corporations, from colonies on the edge of explored space. The civilian emergency response collective activated every available vessel. Mining companies offered their massive or haulers as evacuation transports. Luxury cruise liners that normally ferried tourists between Earth and Mars were retrofitted with emergency life support to carry refugees. On Mars, the shipyards that had been building humanity's next generation of exploration vessels switched production. They started building what the engineers called stellar injectors, massive structures designed to create controlled slip space ruptures that could funnel matter directly into Corona Prime Sun. It's the dumbest, most audacious thing I've ever seen, the lead engineer, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, reported to Captain Chun via Quantum Link. It violates about 30 different principles of safe slip space usage. If we miscalculate by even 1%, we could create a gravitational cascade that collapses the entire system. But it's possible? Sarah pressed. Dr. Tanaka grinned. Captain, I'm Japanese-American. My grandmother survived Hiroshima. My grandfather helped build the first Mars colony. Our family motto is Shogunai. It cannot be helped, so we do it anyway. Hell yes, it's possible. The evacuation began in the second week. The first human vessels to arrive at Corona Prime were greeted by the sight of the Cyrith fleet, what remained of it anyway. Dozens of ships, ranging from personal transports to massive colony vessels, all damaged to varying degrees by the radiation. They're using their own ships to transfer people to the surface staging areas, Rodriguez reported. They're coordinating with our fleet to maximize efficiency. Captain, they're incredible. Their civilization is collapsing, and they're still maintaining perfect order. It wasn't perfect, of course. On level 42 of Keth Mora, a riot broke out when families realized that the evacuation would take months and not everyone would get out. Cyrith's security forces, already stretched thin, struggled to contain the violence. That's when Lieutenant Webb, leading a humanitarian team on the surface, made a decision that would become legendary. He opened a channel to all Sirith emergency frequencies and broadcast in hastily learned Sirith Common. This is Lieutenant Marcus Webb of the Human Rescue Fleet. I know you're scared. I know you've been abandoned before. But I'm going to tell you something about the ships above your heads. Every single one of those vessels is here because individual humans chose to come. They weren't ordered. They weren't forced. They came because they heard your cry for help. Some of them are pilots who've never left their home system. Some are grandparents who should be retired. And every single one of them is prepared to stay here until the last Sirith is evacuated or the planet itself tears apart. We humans have a saying, leave no one behind. We mean it. The riot stopped. Not immediately, but within the hour. And when the evacuation resumed, the Sirith maintained order themselves, creating a system of priority that ensured children and the vulnerable went first. By the end of the second month, 2.3 billion Sirith had been evacuated. They were spread across dozens of human colonies, refugee centers hastily constructed in orbital stations, even temporary habitats on moons and asteroids throughout human space. The cost was staggering. Earth's economy went into recession. The Mars shipyards exhausted their reserves. Private companies that had contributed their fleets faced bankruptcy. And humanity kept going. Ambassador Thelvas of the Velcora Conclave watched it all from his crystalline tower, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. He had sent 7 official messages to Earth Command, each one more urgent than the last, explaining that humanity was destroying its own future for a species that couldn't possibly repay them. The response from Earth's representative was brief. We're not looking for repayment. We're looking to sleep at night. It was his aide, Shulmiz, who finally asked the question that was sweeping through the galactic community. Ambassador, what if they actually succeed? They won't, Thelvas said, but his voice lacked conviction. The plan to stabilize the star is pure fantasy. Even if they manage to create the gravitational injectors, the amount of mass required. His console lit up with an urgent alert. The Corona system. Something was happening. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the UNS Prometheus, a ship built specifically for this mission. Around Corona Prime, 47 other vessels had taken up positions in a perfect sphere, each one carrying a stellar injector. This is insane, her second-in-command muttered. Beautiful but insane. Those are the best kinds of ideas, Yuki replied. She opened a channel to all ships. All vessels, this is Prometheus Actual. We are go for Operation Sunrise. On my mark, activate slip space generators in sequence. Remember, we're not trying to create stable wormholes. We're making targeted ruptures that will pull mass from the system's outer asteroid belt directly into the sun's core. The calculations have been checked 47 times. Trust the math, trust each other, and if anything goes wrong, emergency slip space jump immediately. She took a deep breath. Initiating in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mark. Across the system, 48 ships simultaneously tore holes in reality itself. The energy output was visible from across the galaxy. A sudden flash of impossible light as slip space connected in ways it was never meant to. Asteroids, some as large as moons, began to move. Not slowly, as orbital mechanics would dictate, but instantly, pulled through the fabric of space itself and compressed directly into the heart of Corona Prime's dying sun. The star convulsed. For a moment, it seemed like it might go supernova. Every monitor screamed warnings, every sensor maxed out. On Corona Prime, the remaining 5 billion Sirith looked up at their sky and watched their sun flicker like a dying bulb. Then, slowly, impossibly, it stabilized. The angry red began to fade, replaced by the warm yellow-white of a healthy star. The radiation levels began to drop. The atmospheric storms started to calm. It's working, someone whispered on the command channel. Oh my God, it's actually working. Dr. Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. All vessels, excellent work. Maintain injection sequence for the next 72 hours. We're not done yet. We're feeding a star. Let's not underfeed it. 3 months and 2 weeks after the UNS Endeavour first received the Sirith distress call, Captain Sarah Chun stood on the surface of Corona Prime without an environmental suit. The sky above was clear. The sun, now stabilized, shone with a warm light that the Sirith hadn't seen in over a year. Around her, the first teams of engineers and ecologists were beginning the assessment. Could Corona Prime truly be saved? The answer, surprisingly, was yes. The atmospheric damage was severe but reversible. The radiation would take decades to fully clear, but the levels were already dropping to survivable ranges. With help, and humanity had proven it was willing to help, Corona Prime could be home again in less than a generation. Matriarch Kethal stood beside Sarah, her aged face turned up to the sun. Tears streamed down her blue cheeks. "Thank you," she said simply. "Words are insufficient, but thank you." Sarah clasped the matriarch's shoulder gently. "You don't have to thank us. You just have to remember. When the galaxy abandoned you, humanity chose differently. We hope that when the time comes, when someone else is in trouble, when the math seems impossible, the Sirith will make the same choice." "We will," Kethal promised. "Every child born from this day forward will know the story of the humans who refused to let us die. This debt will be remembered for 10,000 years." 6 months later, the Galactic Conclave was in session, and for the first time in its history, humanity had been granted a full seat. Ambassador Thelvas, representing the Velcora, watched as Sarah Chun, now promoted to admiral and serving as humanity's representative, took her position at the council table. "The human representative has requested time to address the conclave," the arbiter announced. "The floor is yours, Admiral Chun." Sarah stood, and every species in the vast chamber turned to watch her. She was young by galactic standards. Her entire species was young, but she carried herself with a confidence that came from doing the impossible. "Honored members of the conclave," she began. 6 months ago, the Sirith sent out a distress call that 47 civilizations ignored. The math seemed impossible, the cost too high, the risk too great. And according to the established protocols of the galactic community, the right decision was to let them die. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity heard that call and made a different choice. "We didn't do it because we thought we would profit. We didn't do it because we expected gratitude or political leverage. We did it because 8 billion people needed help, and we had the ability to try. The cost was enormous. Our economy is still recovering. Our shipyards exhausted, our resources stretched to breaking. But Corona Prime is habitable again. The Sirith have returned home, and humanity has learned something important about our place in this galaxy." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species far older and supposedly wiser than her own. "We're not here to follow your protocols. We're not here to accept that some mathematics are simply too cruel to question. We're here to remind you that civilizations are measured not by their age or their power, but by their compassion. The galaxy had abandoned the Sirith. Humanity refused. And we will continue to refuse every single time someone asks for help and the universe says it's impossible." The chamber was absolutely silent. Then, from the Sirith section, Matriarch Kethal stood. She raised her hand in the formal gesture of support. "The Sirith stand with humanity." One by one, other species began to stand. Not all of them. Some were too bound by economics and tradition, but enough. Enough to matter. Ambassador Thelvas found himself standing too, much to his own surprise. His aide, Sholmiz, smiled at him. "Perhaps," he admitted quietly, "we elder races had forgotten what it means to be young and foolish enough to believe in the impossible." "Or perhaps," Sholmiz replied, "humanity is teaching us to be wise enough to try." And so the galaxy learned what humanity had always known, that compassion isn't a weakness, but the foundation of true strength. That the word impossible is just an invitation to prove it wrong. That the measure of a civilization isn't found in its technology or its power, but in what it's willing to sacrifice for those who cannot help themselves. The Sirith lived. Corona Prime flourished. And humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors or traitors, but as the species that refused to accept that some people were too expensive to save. The galaxy would never be the same. What did you think of humanity's choice? Would you have made the same decision, even knowing the cost? The galaxy is full of impossible situations, but maybe, just maybe, humanity is the species that proves impossible is just another word for challenge accepted. If you enjoyed this story of human determination and compassion in the face of impossible odds, hit that like button and subscribe for more HFY stories where humanity shows the galaxy what it really means to be civilized. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite moment from the story. Was it the evacuation, the stellar stabilization, or Admiral Chen's speech to the conclave? And if you want to see more stories about humanity defying expectations and rewriting the rules of the galaxy, make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Remember, in a universe full of species that calculate the cost of compassion, humanity will always be the one that simply asks, "How can we help?" Until next time, this is another chapter in humanity's journey among the stars. Stay awesome and never stop believing in the impossible.